Hello everyone, welcome to the Church Brand Guide Podcast. This is Michael Persad. I'm so glad you're here today. We're going to be diving into a topic that I know will interest you. We're talking about how to get people involved in your church. So there's a lot of attenders that come from week to week, and it's hard to move them to a place where they're volunteering and giving of their time, their energy, and their finances to what's happening at the church. So every church, whether you're big or small, you're dealing with this issue. And today we're going to unpack how do you create a brand with your church that cultivates people that will jump in and get involved and be a part of the vision. So we've invited Dick Hardy to come on the podcast. He'll introduce himself a little bit later as we get into the conversation. But just want to let you know that he is very, very qualified to speak on this topic, having decades in the industry, basically, working on staff at a church, and then now as an owner of a consultant group that works with churches. So I'm excited for you to learn about what he has to say regarding this topic. I think it'll really make a difference in how you build your brand right now in your church. So let's go to our conversation with Dick Hardy, and he's going to help us understand how we can get people engaged. Thanks for joining us today on the Church Brand Guide Podcast. Today we've got our guest with us. His name is Dick Hardy. He's been on with us before, and he's back again. And we're going to unpack the topic of getting people from being spectators to getting involved in the church. Welcome, Dick, to the podcast. Glad to have you back.
Thank you, Dr. Prasad. It's great to hang out with you here. We'll just take you right up to that level. So, I love hanging out with you.
Thanks for the promotion. I appreciate it.
That's right.
So why don't you help our audience learn about who you are for a minute. What do you do?
You know, my wife's been asking me that a lot lately. Should I be nervous? We've been blessed here the last 9.5 years. We've had a company called the Hardy Group. And you can find us at thehardygroup.org. And we are a pastoral leadership consulting firm. And so we do personal consulting with pastors. And in the last couple of years, we've really been raising our presence with online services and ministry. And we'll talk a little bit about that at the end of the podcast. But yeah, it's been a great journey that the Lord's allowed us to be part of. I worked at two very large churches, had great experiences at those churches for 20 plus years, and then served as a vice president of Bible College, which gave me a great network. I had a pretty decent network prior to that, but that really gave me a great network of pastors around the country and around the world. So bringing that all together with the experiences and so on, we launched out in 2007 and started the Hardy Group, and Jonathan joined us, our son, who you know, joined us 2 years ago, and helps keep us younger and fresher. So it's all good. It's all good.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on. And today we're going to be talking about this big topic. We come across it a lot in our experience as we talk to churches. Yeah. And I think every church probably struggles with this in some way. How do you get people involved instead of just sitting there and coming in from week to week? Whether you're a small church, you have that problem, or a big church, you still have the same problem.
Yeah, I'll have a lot of smaller churches say, well, big church doesn't have that because they have all those people. Well, let me just tell you, it's only amplified because of the size of everything. So everybody faces it. Absolutely everybody faces this, how to get people involved. Yeah. So you got the magic answer to it today?
Well, that's why you're here. That's why we're cutting that big check.
Right. Yeah, boy, I'm really planning on padding my retirement account with that one. I'm the guy buying lunch today, aren't I?
Actually, yes, that's you're right.
Yeah, it's because I showed up for this interview late, so your listeners can appreciate the fact that I'm having to pay. So
why do you think people are resistant to getting involved?
One of the things I would say, particularly to middle-aged pastors and older, you have to factor that this is a different world than even 5 years ago. But when you talk 10 or 20 years ago, it's a completely different world. The pace of life is just unbelievable. I've got one pastor who would be probably in his mid to late 50s. Good guy. I mean, this guy, man, he wants to win people to the Lord, but he is still thinking that people will give of their time to the church like they did in 1980 or 90 or 2000 or even 2010. And it's not happening. So he's all frustrated, and he blames the people for not being committed when really he has to adjust adjust his expectations and what he wants out of people, and be clear what he wants out of people in order to really move the thing forward. So I don't know if I probably diverted away from your original question, but
no, I think that's great. The whole mentality, I think, is a big factor in why people are just
this busyness.
Yeah.
No. And I don't give that as an excuse.
Yeah.
Because pastors are, well, man, if they were really committed, the church is the most important. Well, we get that, but when you just stop and think of you got to factor the way the people sitting in your church, what their lives are, what the changes, the demands on them. Now you can argue, and you need to teach properly where they have to place their expectations. I'll see pastors, I'll see people. I've been around long enough to know parents, for example, will wrongly place focus for their children on things like sports.
Yeah.
Because you not only have school teams, but now you got club teams and all this stuff. And they'll say, well, my kid's got to be in sports, because they're going to get that scholarship. Well, first of all, most of them won't get that scholarship.
Yeah.
And when you train them that the priority in your family is sports rather than being at the youth group, then all of a sudden when they're 21, 22, 23 years old and they don't want to be part of church, well, you've seeded that with them because you've told them. And I know our purpose here is not parenting, but a pastor does have an obligation to help teach the people. But he also, I think, needs to be spiritually savvy enough to know that if you want people involved, you've got to be very strategic with it, which means things like don't load the calendar. Don't expect people to be there 4 or 5 nights a week. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
You're going to be disappointed. You won't get the end result you want.
Yeah. I'm experiencing this in my life. I've got young kids now.
Well,
so I've been part of church world my entire life. And man, it was so much easier to be involved when I didn't have
kids.
3 kids.
Yeah. Guess what?
Yeah. So even myself sitting in the church, I find that I need to be prompted, and it needs to be as easy as possible, even though I'm a good Christian, so to speak, in quotes, air quotes right now. I really need the church to come alongside me and to help me get involved. And it's not because I don't necessarily want to. It's just because the default of life,
Oh my.
is just so demanding.
It is.
I want to be, but help me out.
Yeah, and churches that are intentional with that will move forward. Churches that live in frustration and don't plan and aren't strategic in when they ask people to be involved, they're going to find themselves be very frustrated and not get the end result of having people get involved.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me too. An older pastor was talking at, I think it was a seminar or something, and he was just talking about the mind shift that you were talking about too. Like back in the older generations, I won't say when because I don't want to make anybody feel bad.
Yeah, well, you're hanging with an old guy here, so just be careful.
There's kind of a mentality that the church is, God's there and the church is a good thing, and people were more willing to maybe jump on board to help out with what's going on. But in recent generations, and I even find myself in some of this, but even the millennials especially, there's more required to get people to think about helping the church than it used to be.
Yeah. And the options for people.
Yeah.
It used to be, I'm old enough to really remember when Sundays, most things were closed down. You're too young to know that, but that was a common thing. Well, not today, for goodness sakes. I mean, I guess people generally close down on Christmas.
Yeah, right.
But no other day.
Yeah.
They're going nonstop. Now you have, some Christian-oriented companies, the Chick-fil-A's and Hobby Lobbies and so on that do, but that's rare.
Right.
So we've got to be aware of that. And then be smart enough to plan fewer things that you want out of people strategically rather than a whole smorgasbord. Back in the day, the way to grow the church was to have more and more and more and more ministries. Well, when you have more and more and more ministries, you need what? More and more and more people.
Yeah.
So I say to churches, what's more valuable? Is it more valuable for you to have 100 ministries and struggle to, and kind of use the term, they're staffed, volunteer staffed in a mediocre way, or to have 10 ministries where you're overloaded and you're off the charts strong in those 10 ministries? Of course, I'd advocate get the 10 really strong ministries where you're asking people high value.
Yeah.
A guy like you, Michael, if I'm a pastor and I'm asking you to do something that occupies your time, you're going to be saying, as a young business professional, is this the best use of my time?
Yeah.
Am I giving of myself to the work of the Lord to the best I can? And if a church can tap that, that's a great thing. If a church only needs to fill slots,
that's good.
It's going to be very short-lived commitment for people.
Yeah.
And on that term, I'm glad I brought up the term commitment. One of the things we have to acknowledge when you said millennials, the day of the commitment generation is gone. Even the boomers, commitment started to wane. It was nothing like what the builder generation was like. But now when you get down to Gen X and millennials, there's no commitment. Doesn't mean they're bad people. It's just that as pastors and church leaders, we've got to understand that. Now that works well for us because they're wide open to what we have. They're not committed to this other thing, whatever the other thing is, maybe the history of how they were raised or whatever. But where there's no commitment and they can easily get involved, there's also no commitment. I can easily uninvolve myself. So while we're involving people, it's got to be high value.
Yeah.
It's got to make sense to them to continue to be involved. Otherwise, you're going to recruit people for very short periods of time, and you're going to be on a continual treadmill trying to get that done.
Yeah, that's good. This is a little bit of a side note. We'll move on, but man, I tell you what, I love to see the wins too. Like if I'm doing something, I'm giving my time and energy towards something.
Show me that it's making the difference.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a little nugget, I think too. If churches get good at that,
I will talk to churches and I tell them, listen, if you have, let's talk greeters. This is a perfect. Everybody gets it. What a greeter does at the door. You're standing there. You're passing out bulletins, shaking people's hand, blah blah blah. Well, if you do that long enough, that's rather routine. Is this all I do? I just stand here at the door and greet people? No, that's not all you do. Because let's use an illustration. Let's suppose 52 people get saved. Make it real easy and obvious what we're doing here.
Yeah.
52 people in a year at your church give their heart to Jesus. And you have, let's make it a little more complicated here, 2 entrances to your building.
Okay.
Well, you do the math on that. 52 people give their heart to the Lord, and you have 2 entrances. You're a greeter.
Yeah.
You have 2 entrances to the building. That means that every other Sunday, somebody's walking through your door, not having a relationship with Jesus.
Yeah.
And they're walking back out the door knowing Jesus. Now that puts a whole new spin on handing bulletins out. Now all of a sudden, you to your point, what value does it? Well, this is the value. You're one of the first flesh-to-flesh contact, shaking a hand, eye-to-eye, smile that person who doesn't know Jesus is going to have. Think of the value of that.
Yeah.
So that's where pastors have to be smart in the way they're communicating that to their volunteers. Let me also say on that, don't assume. Pastors are notorious, churches are notorious for assuming, because we're on the inside, we see all this stuff. We see the reports say, okay, the attendance is kind of going up a little bit here, and this was a great Easter, and that was a great, and these people got sick. You got to tell that story.
Yes, that's good.
You got to tell the story to people.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
anyway, don't get me cranked up.
No, that's good. Love it. And it's important for people to get involved. I mean, it really is for each individual, for the church. A lot of good things happen when people get involved. people they form relationships, and those are just gonna, you never know what's gonna happen once those relationships form. So let's talk about maybe some practical ways that that we can help churches to get people involved. So maybe it's a serve team, maybe it's a small group. What are some ways that you found that are effective in getting people off the bench and into the game?
Well, remind me to talk about that off the bench term.
Okay.
It's a good term,
Okay.
but it's a term that you got to be careful with. I hope that's coming out right. I know this is your podcast, but it is something I want to chat about.
Awesome. Yeah.
I would, one of the things I've seen that's been most successful is as soon as people get to a church, maybe they come back to your hospitality area and you get their contact information, and they're expressing an interest in getting involved. One of the things I strongly encourage a church to do is to create some sort of I know this word will sound like, oh, brother, another class, but create something, call it a class, whatever, for everyone to go through that wants to get involved in ministry. So they want to be involved in the nursery. They want to be involved in the parking lot. Mm-hmm. They want to teach the 5th grade boys Sunday school class. I don't know, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. They want to be on the worship team. Anything. They all go through this thing, and so let's call it something like a connect class,
okay.
Or whatever term you'd want to use. But what it does is it helps everyone get on the same page. Mm-hmm. And this is something churches haven't paid attention to in the past. But the larger growing churches are now really paying attention to this, because it's important that everybody understands the church's mission, their core values, the thinking of the pastor. Now, the pastor's probably not teaching it necessarily, because like you want to do it at the most convenient time, which means not a Tuesday night or Thursday night. For the new person, you want to do it on a Sunday morning, the most natural time for them to be there. Now, I'm not suggesting you do a little 15-minute thing. I mean, give it some oomph, but you want to help prepare everyone to be on the same page. Mm-hmm. You talk a lot about, we've talked about hospitality. Mm-hmm. Well, hospitality is just the greeter's job? No, hospitality is everybody's job. Mm-hmm. Including the outside parker, the 5th grade Sunday school, it's everybody. Yeah. So you can talk about those. So you move people, they come in, they're guests, they identify themselves, and then you say, we want you to go to the Connect class if you want to get involved. And then at the Connect class, you begin to see opportunities that are available. So suppose you're a gregarious, big mouth kind of guy like I am, and you don't mind meeting people. The Michaels and the Dicks of this world may say, well, I kind of gravitate to the hospitality ministry. I like doing that. It's kind of a natural for me. Or maybe you have somebody that's a little quieter, like my wife is, and she says, man, I like to work more in the early childhood area where I'm a little more behind the scenes. Well, at that Connect class, you can find those spots where you can move into connection. And then you see, by the time you connect into those, everybody who's connected into something has gone through this initial thing, this Connect class, that put them all on the same page. Mm. So that'd be one of the things I'd really be looking at doing in terms of helping people get connected into something like that. Now, at the same time, I don't know if this is the spot I'm supposed to bring this up, so if it's not, slap my hand. I would also be talking about small groups.
Sure.
Because you want people connected in small groups. You want them connected in ministry and small groups. Now, one of the things you have to be careful of is somebody decides, I want to get involved in a small group, and because I'm involved in a small group, I don't have to serve. Well, that doesn't work. Because, if you build a whole church of small groups, then nobody's working. Or the flip side is true. I'm involved in a ministry, therefore I don't have to be in a small group. Well, no, that doesn't work, because you got to build relationships. So you want those going in tandem.
So what do you recommend with the Connect class? What's the length? Is it 4 weeks? Is it a week? I
recommend a week.
A week?
1 week, yeah. Because I see people, I said that I had the ultimate, I thought, what was this guy doing? He had an 18-week course. And he had great content in there, but I said, nobody's going to come to you're setting yourself up to be so stinking frustrated because people won't stick with that.
Yeah.
So I would boil it down. Listen, we're in a Twitter world. 140 characters. So to think that people are going to come in to 18, yeah, I mean, good luck. So I would boil it into, no, it's probably a law. It's probably got some length to it. So like if you're the church I'm thinking of that does this, they do 2 services on a Sunday, but this cadet class is like 3 hours. So it's all morning. But the point is, it's all morning at a time where they're thinking of coming to church anyway because they're in that mode. But that's kind of my 2 cents worth. So.
Okay, so yeah,
Yeah.
keep it short.
Now on the off the bench thing.
Yeah.
One of the things, I had one pastor that was very honoring. I'm 62 years old, so I'll just admit it. I'm 62, and he was very honoring of older people, and older people for him were any 60, 70, 80, and he remembered these people. He had grown up in the church, left, went to college, worked at another church, then came back as the lead pastor when he was in his early 30s. Well, he remembered people who were now in their mid-70s. He remembered how active they were when they were in their early 40s or 50s.
Yeah.
Because he was a little kid. And now they're not. And he wanted to get them off the bench. And I says, give up. Don't. While you want opportunities for that, there is life cycle, and the older that people get, frankly, the energy begins to wane. So don't expect the 70-year-old who loves Jesus, who loves the church, and who, when they were 40, they were head over heels in things. Don't expect that they're going to come back and you're going to jumpstart them into ministry. Provide opportunities, yes, but don't hang your hat on that.
Yeah.
You've got to keep going for the new people that are coming into church.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
But I do love old people,
Yeah.
so just don't have some of your listeners send you nasty grams saying, "Where'd you get this guy?"
So what are some maybe practical things, or maybe just pick one something? I've seen churches do this in different ways. Like they might have a rally week to get as many people into a serve team as possible. They might do a sermon series. They might do maybe individual ministries are out recruiting different places. Maybe there's a staff position. So there's different ways to get people into involvement in the church. Can you maybe pick one of those and just...
Well, let me start with the one I wouldn't do,
Yeah.
Because it never works, is let's do pulpit announcements. So we need 2 more people in the nursery. That's terrible to do a pulpit announcement to say you need 2 more people in the nursery, because what you've just communicated to the guest is that you're understaffed.
Mm-hmm.
Why would I want to come to a church that can't get people to take care of my kids in the nursery? So don't do that. And you'll get youth pastors say, hey, I need some more youth workers. I need some pastor. Would you? No. All those kind of announcements say you don't have your act together.
Yeah.
So don't do that publicly. I would suggest that you do have, in the same way pastors will frequently make sure that they have a tithing message once a year.
Yeah.
I'd have an involvement message once a year. I'd have something... And the first and second times a year that people would jump into a ministry are September. That's number 1, back to school. Number 2 is January, first of the year.
Good to know.
So you want to fire away at those 2 times, but I would maybe put on your schedule. We've talked about calendar, that you're going to have one time a year that you're really going to talk about involvement. And you know, I don't know. I wouldn't advocate this, although I've seen it done where, okay, we're going to be involvement, and now we have a ministry fair out there. Go out there and sign up.
Yeah.
The best volunteer, if Dick Hardy wants a volunteer serving in my ministry, the best way for it to happen is for me to pick up the phone and call Michael and talk to Michael.
Yeah.
Talk to my friend or my new acquaintance or the new person, Michael, because it's a real personal contact. So I say that to your youth pastor, to your children's directors. You got to get on the phone. Oh, yeah, I know, but well, man. Well, don't whine and moan about it. That's the way it happens.
Yeah.
Big church, small church, you've got to personally talk to people. So I think if you put something together where the pastor has an emphasis on that, say the first year, when people are thinking about reconfiguring their schedule, then after that message comes out, then your staff, your volunteers, smaller churches, volunteers, need to be geared up to be making phone calls to people and personal invitations. People will respond to a personal invitation.
That's good.
Yeah.
And this is a good one, but the phone call. Are there any other ways that people that you recommend to get people to sign up?
Well, I say phone call. It's personal. It's catching somebody in the lobby. It's not come fill my slot.
Yeah.
People want to be involved where there's value. So, and another thing, there's a great book for your listeners. It's called Your Volunteers.
Okay.
I highly recommend it. Chris Mavity, Mavity. You can get it on Amazon. Is the author. He's a friend of mine, and it's an easy read. But it's talking about how you treat volunteers. He says, you think about it, particularly when we're talking. We talked in one of these other podcasts, Michael, about guests, but we will frequently treat our guests like way up here. I'm putting my hand way high in the air.
Okay.
And we'll treat our volunteers way down low, like down low at the floor. We just take for granted our volunteers. We take for granted that this gal has been serving in the nursery for 3 years. We take for granted that the usher is there, that the greeter is there. You've got to. Volunteers are the greatest asset of the church. When you think, how would you run church without volunteers? So that book, Your Volunteers, will really help bring that into focus for you. But it is somehow a personal contact. I will say something relative to recruiting volunteers, and this book will talk about this, is when you're recruiting volunteers, you cannot be desperate. So when you want somebody to get involved, you can't be desperate as a church leader. If you're desperate, you lose. Now, you might feel desperate. The classic. I got to get nursery workers. Well, guess what? I mean, the day you and I are recording this is a Monday, and if you had midweek service, Wednesday's coming. I've got to have. Well, that's desperate.
Yeah.
You've got to be planning for the long haul, and you've got to be prepared for a potential volunteer, someone you want involved in ministry, to say no.
Yeah.
If they say no, are they out forever? No. Relationally, you keep it going so that you can help bring that person back into involvement again at another time when their heart is right for it.
That's great.
So, anyway.
That's great. Well, Dick, thanks for sharing.
Absolutely.
What's a good way for people to get in contact with you?
Yeah, that'd be great. Love to chat with anybody. And if you're listeners, the website is thehardygroup.org. My personal email, of course, you can click on it there, but is dhardy@thehardygroup.org. You can also contact us and Ryan Wakefield through churchmarketinguniversity.com.
Yeah.
And that is a great offering to churches that is not currently open, but if you go there, you can get your name on the wait list and get preferred access to it when we do open it up. Also, on this kind of subject and all sorts of subjects germane to pastors and ministry, we have a monthly membership that is priced very nominally for pastors to be part of, called The Inner Circle.
Yeah.
So if you go to thehardygroup.org, go to services, and click on, I think it's called Level 2 Consulting is The Inner Circle. That'll give you all the information about how you can begin to participate. We've got hundreds of pastors and church leaders around the world that are in that, getting resources every week to help them lead better and be a better pastor.
Amazing. Well, thanks for letting us know about those resources and how they can take this conversation much further. So thanks for coming on the podcast.
Absolutely, Michael.
Appreciate you coming on.
You bet.
Thanks for listening today to the podcast. Super helpful information from Dick Hardy. I want to say thanks again for him coming on the podcast and sharing those insights and just helping us understand how we can do this better to get people engaged in our church. Just an update on what I'm doing. I wanted to let you know that I'll be working a lot more closely with a local church here in my area in Kansas City to help them grow by building a strong brand. So I'll be keeping some hours on site and just helping them as a consultant to build a brand, implement marketing techniques, build a photography team, create videos, create graphics, and do everything that we talk about on the podcast. I'll be helping them to actually execute it. So I'm excited because I think I'll be able to give you a lot more insights on how this is working. and maybe even some insights on what worked, what didn't work, what we're trying, why we're trying it. So I think it'll be a much richer podcast to be able to share what we're doing so you can benefit from those insights. One resource I want to let you know about before we close our podcast is a book called Made to Stick by Dan and Chip Heath. In this book, the authors unpack why some ideas are sticky and they stay around for a very long time, and why other ideas just go away. So they're really good at helping us understand why fables are sticky and they're with us for thousands of years, or parables, or even more recently, urban legends. And it also unpacks like why do certain things not stick? Like many vision statements to organizations are just not sticky. People don't remember those things. But if a church can begin to understand how people think and what makes an idea stick with them, then they could be so much more effective at presenting a vision that's going to stay with the people and motivate them for quite some time. So it's a great book, a great read, some great insights, especially to this big idea called the curse of knowledge. So we've talked about it before in our podcast, and it's basically the idea that when you know something really well, it's hard to teach somebody that doesn't know what you know. So really good book. Again, it's called Made to Stick by Dan and Chip Heath. I highly recommend that you get it. If you go to our blog at churchbrandguide.com, we have a link that you can link out to buy that book and get it on Amazon. The free resource I'd like to highlight today is a questionnaire that we have on building a website. So if you're interested in building a website for your church, you can download this questionnaire from our blog. It's free, and it provides a bunch of questions that'll help guide you through a good website for your church. So this can help you as you look for a developer to basically have some answers so that you can get a really good fit with your developer to help you develop the right thing for your church. So on our blog for this episode at churchbrandguide.com, you can click on our resources and get that free download, and hopefully that helps you out if you're looking to build a website. Well, thanks for joining me today on the podcast. Check us out on Facebook and leave some comments. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to review us on iTunes as well. That's super helpful to get the message out there to other people. So hopefully we're helping you, and you're doing a great job of building a strong brand for your church. Thanks again for joining me, and I'll see you next time.